إن الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه وعليه نتوكل ونتوب إليه ونعوذ به من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله هو ختم الأنبياء وإمام المرسلين فصلوات الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما وسلموا عليكم بتحية الجنة اليوم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته أما بعد. So we are now, inshallah, in the final part of this blessed month of Ramadan, and hopefully we're all learning some lessons about, how to live our lives. Hopefully we've had some introspection into some aspects of our behavior and character that we need to improve. Inshallah, we are been improving our relationship with Allah Ta'ala, both through the outward actions of increasing or maintaining, things like the prayer and the salah and the fasting. But also, hopefully, we're also learning some other things like just, how to, be kinder to one another, how to be more gentle, how to withdraw from the world a little bit. And that's a little bit of what I want to talk about today of how can we make, after having almost finished the month, inshallah, what are some of the lessons that we can take home and then use immediately after, or even right now, but immediately after Ramadan, so that we can hopefully maintain some of what we had in it, even though that there is no other month that is like the month of Ramadan. Nonetheless, we have to go on with our lives, and we hope to do it at a level that was greater than before we entered the month. I also want to talk about, because in the news, there's been a couple of events in the news that I will also tie into as well, is something for us to think about. But as we talked in the Khatira the other night, Allah Ta'ala actually describes Him sending the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He describes sending him with a number of unique and important characteristics. I think these are characteristics it's very, very important for myself and for you to try to embody, because within these just few simple qualities, we can really find a way to make the community, I think, a better place to live, eat, breathe, just to be Muslim. So Allah Ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Inna arsalnaka shahidan. Allah Ta'ala first says, and we sent you, Muhammad. We sent you as what? Shahid, meaning like as a witness, somebody that's going to stand for the truth, and that will be a embodiment of the truth as well. So this is as we say, this is the month unzila fihi al-Qur'an. We talk a lot about the Qur'an, but it's also important to talk about, well, who is the one that the Qur'an was sent to? And as Aisha radiallahu anha said, what kana Qur'anan yamshi ala al-ard, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was literally like the Qur'an walking on the earth. So in this way, Allah Ta'ala first lays out one important characteristic, is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was what? Shahid, meaning that you're going to be a person of truth. You're going to give, correct testimony. I was reading the other day about a Chinese businessman. He said that on one hand, he was very impressed by the Muslims and their dedication in the outward sense to religion. So he works as a manufacturer in China, and as we know, practically everything is made in China. And he noticed that when he wanted to invite the Muslim guys he was doing a business deal with, he wanted to invite them to have something to eat. But of course, it was in the daytime. They said, no, we're fasting. So he said, wow, this is really impressive. You don't eat, you don't drink. This is really admirable. You must have a lot of discipline to do this. But then he noticed that actually the thing that he was manufacturing for them was these fabricated knockoffs and putting their label on something that really belonged to somebody else, and China is known for doing this. And then he asked them, he said, is this permissible in your religion to do this kind of copyright infringement? And it left them in this very uncomfortable circumstance where on the outward, they appear very pious. On the outward, they seem very observant, but when it comes to the more subtle quality of being shahid, of being truthful, this was not so apparent. And this is something we all struggle with. Being truthful living up to the truth, embodying the truth is a difficult task for all of us, but it's important to remember that not only the book that was sent with him, but then the messenger himself, and that there is no discrepancy between the two, that he was shahid, that it was as important, that he was an embodiment of the truth. The other important part is that he also described the Prophet ﷺ as what being mubashiran, that he was a person that was positive. A person who is bashir, right, as a happy person, is a positive person. That doesn't mean that everything in their life is always perfect. Matter of fact, if we look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, as we talked about, there's a lot of things that from our perspective we would not call perfect, in terms of losing wives and loved ones and family members and sickness and all of these things and hardship. We ourselves would not describe this as being perfect. And yet despite this, he was known to be an upright and also a happy person. In fact, many of the companions described the Prophet ﷺ as that whenever I saw him, he was smiling. Right? So he gave off an overall positive vibe. And I've made the observation, I don't know how many times within our own midst, that when you come to the masjid or you come around the Muslims, everybody's so stone-faced and serious, and that the Prophet ﷺ, one of his nicknames was what? Dhahak. In the Arabic it means the one who laughs. So the Prophet ﷺ was known to be a jovial person. Yes, he also was serious, and he became upset at certain things, or when it was time for serious things, he was serious, but his general nature was a positive and happy person. So Allah Ta'ala says, what? Wa mubashiran. We also sent you, what? To be a source of good news. What is the ultimate good news? The ultimate good news is, one, this life isn't it. Imagine how depressing, actually, if this life were really all that it was. Imagine how much of a letdown this would be, because you're only going to get, what, 50, 60, 70, 80. Even if you live to some extreme length of 100 years, you will not be able to hang on to it very long. And, the first 50 is not going to be like the last 50, and so on and so on. As you get older, things just, you don't enjoy life in some ways as much, or life can even become a burden. So imagine if this were it, how much of a disappointment this would be. So part of the tabshiran, part of the giving the good news, this life, it is a temporary thing. It doesn't last forever. And that, don't worry, the things that you truthfully really want to enjoy, the happiness, the sakina, the tranquility, all of these things that you really do want to get, you will get them. You just can't get all of them in this life. And therefore, that should help to give us a balance of how we deal with the ups and downs of life that will undoubtedly test our faith, test our patience, test our sense of gratitude, right? It is not easy always being grateful to Allah. We talk about, right, being grateful to Allah. But the truth is, sometimes it isn't always easy for us. So at least, we can take this shining example called Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and see that he went through many, many difficult hardships that we hopefully can relate to in a very concrete and very material way. That, he lost his parents, he lost his uncle, he lost his grandfather, he lost his uncle, who was not just his uncle, but really like a father figure. He lost his daughters, and yet he was what? Mubashiran. He was somebody also. But then he balanced this. Allah Ta'ala balanced the sending of the Prophet of being happy with what? Nadhiran. Of letting people know that, yeah, even though it's true, this life isn't permanent, you won't stay here for very long. If you do right, you can, but there is also a consequence for everything you do in the next life. That is good and bad, but letting you know that it isn't all, just milk and honey. That there are some risks depending on how you behave, depending on how you act. That what you do in this life counts for good and bad. So he is what? Mubashiran wa nadhiran. And then Allah Ta'ala says, what? وَدَاعِيًا إِلَى اللَّهِ بِإِذْنِهِ. Then his other function was to call people to Islam, was to call people to God. And in doing so, it says what? بِإِذْنِهِ, according to Allah's want. Right? Not calling to people according to our want, but according to Allah's want, which means, primarily what? By the book of Allah is going to be the primary instruction. And of course, according to his explanation in his life of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are a few qualities. And then at the end of this ayah, he says what? وَالسِّرَاجًا what? Muniran. Right? That he was also what? Like a shining light. And that, it brings me to this point where over the last couple of days, some of you have may seen, there were two high profile, so to speak, celebrities that committed suicide. And you may say, well, Ramadan, khutbah, is this the right time to be talking about suicide? Well, here's the thing. Number one, suicide is not a non-Muslim problem. We have this issue in our own community. Not that long ago, we were faced with somebody in our community, a young person that took their life. So it is a real issue. And one of the tragedies about it is that this will be seen as a tragedy simply because these people that took their lives were famous. Right? But there are many people struggling with having a sense of worth of themselves, of being able to either balance pressure. Maybe they feel intense work pressure or the pressure to perform, or perhaps they've had all of the things that we might want to have in this, like wealth and fame, and they found that there was nothing at the bottom of that well. There was nothing to drink from. There was nothing to satisfy their soul. And then on top of it, of course, there is just simply that have chemical imbalance, mental issue in the brain. So for our community, we can actually look at how to improve the quality of people's lives by first what? Being truthful. Letting people know what the truth is and letting it be a source of comfort for them. There is a God, there is a creator, there is a Rabb who cares for you and has given you life. And that life is not to be squandered and it's not without its purpose. You may have to go on a little bit of a journey to discover what it is particularly for you, but your life does have meaning because Allah does not create anything except that He had desired to do so. Allah doesn't operate on, well, should I do it because there's some benefit? Allah is not concerned with this. He is Al-Ghani Al-Hamid. He is beyond want and He is fully praiseworthy. So when Allah made each and every one of us, with whatever qualities we may have, whatever talents we may have, but also with whatever weaknesses, whatever flaws that we may have, all of this was created with a higher purpose, إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُوا, right? To worship Him, that is what we're going to find the ultimate purpose in our life. But all of us have to discover this in our own way. But if we can be a witness for a person, which means also being with them, the Prophet ﷺ, by being shahid, he was with his community. He was present with them and he provided them tangible leadership. And I will give one example, inshallah, in the second khutbah. But also being upright. How is it that people feel so sad and so detached and so alone in a world that has this kind of stuff all the time, supposedly keeping us all interconnected? What is it that people are missing? It's a human element. And it's also a God element. It's an ilahi element. So this is something that we can do to be in each other's lives. As I said, we can talk about لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه. We can talk about none of you will have faith until you love for your brother or sister what you love for yourself, but that's not the same as somebody actually knowing you, knowing your name, caring about you, maybe visiting you, encouraging you when times are tough, right? Being a good friend. And therefore, many of us lament about being alienated or sometimes being lonely. That means we also have to be willing to be the friend that we want to have. And that's the struggle I think that many of us will have. And then Allah Ta'ala, He gives him an additional instruction. He then tells the Prophet, وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Right? Not only are you mubashir, not only the one that gives happy news or glad tidings, but then doubly so give it to the people of faith. وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Right? That for them, بِأَنَّ لَهُمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ فَضْلًا كَبِيرًا. That for them is a generous and enormous reward that comes from the few little things that Allah Ta'ala asks for us to sacrifice in this life. And to be quite honest, we're going to sacrifice them anyway, whether we believe in Allah or not. So if you think about it, Allah asks us, Kutiba alaykum as-siyam. We have to fast during the month of Ramadan and we have to give up, right, food and drink and sex during the day. Well, most of us, when we go to work during the day, there is no sexual relation. right? When we go to work, we're not just eating all day long. Or if we want to have a better body, we're always jumping on the latest fab diet. Do this, Atkins, keto, South Beach, North Beach, East Beach, West Beach, whatever, wherever the beach is. We're always jumping on the latest fad because we want to improve ourselves. So through many so-called secular or non-religious means, we will gladly abstain from things. Or we want a nice house, we'll save our money for months or years at a time to put a down payment on a house. But Allah Ta'ala says what? وَأَنفِقُوا مِمَّا رَزَقْنَاكُمْ. Spend out of what we gave you, which means taking some of your hard-earned money and giving it to strangers that actually you may have no relationship with, but they have haqq, they have a right to it. مَعَلُمْ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. Right, for the poor people, al-masakin. So if you look very carefully at your life, the things that Allah Ta'ala asks you to sacrifice, for Him, one way or another, you're going to sacrifice it anyway. If you have children, you will sacrifice your life, your time, your wealth, your patience. You'll sacrifice everything for your family. Even for your job, you will get up early in the morning. How many of us, if we were up for a promotion or making a certain kind of money or just out of need, if the job starts at 5 o'clock in the morning, we will be up at 4 o'clock. But how many of us, when it's for Fajr, it's like, well, I'm going to keep hitting the snooze button. It's interesting that Allah has put these things in our life, whether we do it for Him or whether we do it for something in the dunya, we're going to do it anyway. So why not do it for Him? Because the dunya gives us no reward. Right? When Allah says, well, أَنَّ لَهُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ فَضْلًا كَبِيرًا, for them is a generous and massive reward. There is no reward that we will get from anything in this life. Right? If you work 100 years like cats and dogs, you work like, as we would say, like a runaway slave for 100 years and you go into the grave, that corporation is going to do nothing for you when you go on that box in the ground. So it's something to really think about. What is it then that is beyond death? What is it that's in the next life that Allah Ta'ala is constantly trying to remind us about? As one of my ulama had said when we were studying qira'ah, when we were studying Quran, he said that almost every single page in the Mus'haf in the Quran, Allah Ta'ala has some mention of akhirah. That's how important it is. And as you get a little older, some of the young people here may not realize, but you get a little bit older, you suddenly realize like, wow, time is going by very fast. And I'm at that point now where like, you know what? I'm really glad there's something beyond this life because, at my age, I've only got a little bit while longer to enjoy it. I'm just starting to enjoy life and now my body's starting to break down and parts are hard to find and so to speak. So think about it. You have a choice to give up sleep. You can either do it for your job or you can do it for Allah. You can give up money, you can pay bills, you can give it to Comcast or Xfinity or whatever. You're going to give up money in this life either way. You can either do it for your Lord or you can do it for something in this life that when you go, this life and people in it, they're not going to be able to do anything for you. So I want to, in the second khutbah, just relate a simple story from an encounter with the Prophet ﷺ, talking about love and how we as a community, one of the things I think we should really work on is engendering a sense of love, not only between ourselves, which is very important, but also as our gift to the society that we live in to show that love is crucial. When people don't feel loved or they don't have value, they do horrible things, including even going to the extreme of taking their lives. أولا نسأل الله بالعافية ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا استغفر الله استغفر الله استغفر الله. الحمد لله وكفاه وصلواته وسلامه على رسوله المصطفى وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. So there was an encounter where a man was sitting with the Prophet ﷺ. And they don't even relate his name. Anas bin Malik relates this hadith. And it's important, the names aren't really important here. So there's a man sitting with the Prophet ﷺ. And it says, فَمَرَّ بِهِ رَجُلٌ. Right? Then another man happens to pass by. Maybe they were having a conversation or something. And so the man says to the Prophet ﷺ, he says, Ya Rasulullah, inni la uhibbu hadha. Oh, Messenger of Allah, see that person over there? I love them. And the Prophet ﷺ says to him, yeah? He says, a'lamtahu? Have you made him aware of it? right? This, a'lama, this verb in Arabic doesn't, it's similar to the word ilm, alama, means to know, but in this inflection, it means to make somebody else know, to make them aware, to inform them. So the Prophet ﷺ asked him, have you actually, it's great that you love this person, but have you made them aware of your love? فَقَالَ لَا يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. He said, no, I haven't. He said, then, أعلمته, أعلمه, right? Let him know. Let him know, inform him. Don't tell me, right? Because the object of your love is this person, right? It doesn't do me any benefit for you to tell me that you love this person. It will benefit them that they know that you love them. And that's one of the fundamental qualities that human beings need in this life. Human beings need love. Humans need love more than they need a lot of other things, more than material wealth, right? They need love in the way that they need food and water and shelter. And in fact, love is a kind of shelter for people. It's what allows children to feel safe and secure. One of my teachers, Dr. Jackson, was telling me that as a child, his father worked very hard, and they did not grow up very rich. They grew up actually, on the poorer side. And he was relating that as a child, because his dad had to work a lot, he didn't see his father very often. And therefore, when his mother would try to put him to bed as a child, he would be kind of anxious because, where's dad? It's hard to go to sleep because dad gives this sense of comfort. Even though I don't see my father a lot, I know he loves me and it provides a sense of comfort. So he said that every night they would go through this ritual, they would kind of fight of putting him to bed. And then his father's car would pull into the driveway or something, and they would hear the tires roll up. And that sound of the car approaching, he would get a little sleepy. And then he would hear the car door close, and he would get a little sleepy. And then he would hear his father's footsteps coming to the house, and he would get a little more sleepy. And by the time his father actually got up to the room to kiss him goodnight, khalas, he was asleep. This is what love does. It provides a sense of security. It means that people are okay. They can get through the difficulties of life. That's one of the blessings that I have had, and I thank Allah for, of having two loving parents. I've never had to guess in my life whether I was a loved person or not. But don't assume everybody is the same. If you see somebody, tell them you love them. Ana uhibbuk fillah, whatever your language is. I love you for the sake of Allah, lillah. Let them know. Let them know your affection. Smile. Embody. Try to go, but some of us, it might not be our nature. Maybe the culture we come from or just our personality. But this is why, وَلَقَدْ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. This is why there is an excellent example in the Messenger of Allah, meaning that the bar that Allah Ta'ala set of giving this uswatun hasana, this excellent example, it's far above any of us. It's above any imam, any scholar, any wali, I don't care, whatever. That is the bar of humanity to achieve. And therefore, we have to be willing to go beyond our comfort zone if this Islam thing is really going to work and to manifest. And again, if we do this, we can shut off all the pamphlet printing presses. We will never need to be able to have to go and explain to non-Muslims. We will never need to explain to people what is Islam. They will simply see it and then they will desire it for itself. And you may look across the table one day from yourself at iftar and see some faces you never saw before, not because of how great you are, but how great He is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I ask Allah Ta'ala to bless us in this month, to make us the embodiment of His messenger, to make us love one another, and to spread this shining example to the rest of the society that we live in.